When I start to look at the total cost of actually building one of these houses, it's like, wait, how do I actually make this make sense, especially risk-adjusted returns? So it's like, if everything keeps going up the same way that it is right now, like 15% year over year, okay, fine. But is that actually sustainable with all this money printing and all these other things? Like I'm looking at the macro picture. I'm like, this somebody's going to be stuck, holding the bag when the music stops and taking on residential development with the costs that we have right now. I don't see it working.
Welcome to Real Talk with Gary. If you are listening to this show, that means you are either searching or ready to make a financial change in your life. This show is not only about real estate investing, but also the importance of mindset and the roadmap to a better, healthier life. Learn the daily routines of successful entrepreneurs and the latest market strategies and trends to stay ahead of the curve. Ready for some down-to-earth, north of the border Canadian talk? Here's your host, Gary Hibbert.
All right, welcome back. And today I've got Yakov Pertchik. He is a tech executive. He's a real estate investor, and he is an industrial land developer. And I actually saw him speak, and I really enjoyed his talk. And that's one of the reasons why I have him on the show today. And especially with the current macroeconomic and geopolitical situation that we're facing in the world today. Because of that, Yakov was drawn into the industrial asset class as a strategy of his choice. Yakov has now initiated industrial development projects over 1.4 million square feet with a final value worth an estimate 500 million, with several more that is currently in the works. And we dive into how we got started in the industrial market, the just-in-time versus the just-in-case model for industries and their supplies, the difference between industrial zones, what is the triple net lease, the current state of the trade wars, globalization, and what that means. And if you haven't heard of BRICS, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and how that all plays in together. Very intriguing conversation. I think you guys are going to enjoy this one a lot. Now, before we dive into it, I just want to touch on what's been happening in the market and what we're seeing on the streets. And we're still seeing multiple offers, but not as aggressive as they were back in, say, March and April of 2023. And we did a Peterborough property tour recently. And I was just doing a quick little talk, a little intro at the tour. And what I said was that, in 2020 and 2021, there was like almost no fear in the market. It was very interesting times when it came to real estate investing. And what is back in the market right now is fear again. But if I was to go back and take a look at my entire investing career from 2000 is when I first started, there was fear almost every single year in the marketplace. And so really, what I'm saying is that this is another great time to be investing. Well, while people are fearful, this is when you want to get back into the market. Now, is it difficult to get in the market? Maybe. But what you want to be doing is you want to strategize. You want to make sure that you're buying a property that makes sense. And listen, and there's nothing wrong. And I've said this before, right? And again, this is your own investing strategy that you want to deploy. Lock it in. Lock it in for 4 years, lock it in for 5 years. And if you've got a property that's working, it cash flows, it suits your needs, there's nothing wrong with that. And then you can revisit in 5 years down the road. All right. That's my little tip. I'm also, if you haven't seen it, over on YouTube now. If you like to watch the shows, you can watch them over there. Also, for our mentorship program, the one that we currently have running right now is almost complete. And then Darlene and I, we're going to be going on our summer hiatus, and then we're back. We're back in September, and we currently have 2 spots. Now, we're down to 2 spots left. So if you want to get into real estate investing, you want to get coached by myself and Darlene, where we dive into some incredible fundamentals that you need to know before you invest in real estate. Go to garyhibbert.ca, and you can sign up for a free discovery call. And last but not least, if you're enjoying the podcast, please leave a short review over on iTunes or Spotify or even on YouTube. All right. So with that, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's show. And I'll talk to you guys next week. Take care. Today's show is brought to you by Deep Pockets. Are you looking to borrow or invest funds? Deep Pockets is a preferred choice for secure lending. As a borrower, you have the option with flexible terms and repayment plans. as we have flexible credit criteria and income approvals. As an investor, you get to be the bank using your cash. You can use your RRSPs, your LIRAs, and even your TFSAs. Earn maximized cash flow or return with no out-of-pocket expenses. Yakov, we're live. How you doing, brother?
Doing great. How
Good.
are you?
I'm awesome. Good to have you in here. I'm excited.
Thank you.
I saw your talk and I was intrigued with it. And I was like, I got to have you come out and do a talk for me. And well, not more talk. This is a podcast to hang out with me anyways and learn more about what you do.
Love it. And I saw your talk and I definitely was like, I want to hang out with this guy. So let's do it.
You know what? We had a really good conversation. What was it? Maybe like 6 weeks ago or so, like just recently after we were at the event.
Yeah.
And we had a very intriguing conversation.
Yeah. Two macro nerds going at it. It was so good.
I like it. But you know what? I want to talk more about what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
And then we'll get into that macro stuff. I think that macro stuff is very important with everything that's happening in the world today.
Sure.
And especially too, with the industrial investing that you're doing right now, that plays a big part into it, right? But why don't we kind of dive into your story? You obviously got into real estate, residential investing first, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about that.
Sure.
Why? Because I always like to know why people get into real estate investing. Did you get dragged into it? Did you kind of just wake up one day and say, hey, this is the path that I want to do?
It was a bit of both, if I'm honest. It was like I was working as a consultant for a long time. I'm actually still working in consulting and tech consulting. And at some point, probably 10 years ago, I was like, I'm so done with selling my time for money. But I couldn't find the right vehicle. And after my wife and I got married, and her father-in-law, he was doing a fair amount of real estate investing. He said, "You guys should probably start buying some real estate." And I hadn't really looked at it until then.
What year?
This is 2019.
Okay.
And so we looked at a few places, and my agent, he said, "Hey, by the way, maybe your second and third place, you can make that into a triplex." I had one of my clients make a triplex not too far from here, and I said, interesting. So I went and I binged Andrew Hines' podcast for like 2 days straight to learn everything there is to know about real estate investing, about different strategies, what are the terms that I should know, things like that. And then I started to run some numbers, and we looked at about 14 houses as my wife and I were shopping. And at first we're like, hey, we're going to buy like a single family home. But I was like, wait, no. Let's just do a triplex conversion as a first one. It'll make the second one easier.
Right. And where were you looking?
So I really wanted to be near the new Eglinton line that's coming out. So this is like
also right in Toronto.
Like right in Toronto. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it was like along Eglinton. Cause I already knew that there was something that was sexy about real estate, that we know the values are going to go up. And this way with the subway line opening, we knew that the values are going to go up pretty hard. And so then when I started to think about renters, I'm like, oh, they'll probably want to be near transit. So that's when that corridor became the only place that I wanted to look. So along Eglinton, find a value place. And we looked at a bunch, and then we ended up buying the first one that we saw.
And what did you pick it up for?
So we bought it for $837.
$837. So I'm glad we're talking about this, because a lot of people will say, oh, there's no deals in Toronto. I'm sure there's lots of deals. And I can tell you this as well too. Like I'm starting to do property tours in Toronto, and I can see where these deals are. We kind of focus more on the east side. We did a lot of Durham. Now we're out in Peterborough and some of the tertiary markets. But now we're looking at Toronto saying, no, there's some great opportunity here. Yeah. And if the rents and the numbers make sense, why not? Yeah.
So in that, like at that time in 2019, Toronto rents were high. Other places, not so much. They were still good, but not so much. And so even when I was on I was working with Matt McKeever, he was like, Toronto is a cash flow black hole. Don't even look there. And I was like, wait, I don't get it. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at this place. I can make over $2,000 for a 2-bedroom unit. I make 3 of these units. We're definitely cash flowing hard here. Right. And so, I went against all my mentors. I said, let's go. So bought my first one in 2019, converted that to a triplex, and it was just fantastic.
What was the conversion cost? Let's kind of run through some quick numbers here.
$130. It was $130 to do the whole thing.
So $130. Yeah. Was it easy to work with the city? Did you know that you could convert it into a triplex, knowing that it was a single family home?
So it was a little dodgy, because in Toronto, they were already way behind on rental units. So their inspectors in Toronto, they just generally turn a blind eye to this kind of stuff. They're like, as long as it's safe, as long as it's fire code compliant, we don't care that it's zoning compliant. Now, I might get in trouble for that, but really, that's the truth. And honestly, now the zoning is catching up. Right now, there's new rules coming through that
with Bill 23.
Exactly. So they're just catching up because they're like, everyone's doing this anyways, and we need the housing. So I was just in there. I said, I'm not going to go with the city. I'm going to do this fire code compliant, but I'm going to make this safe. But I'm not going through that house.
Yeah,
so,
it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen now with the price of these homes now that Bill 23 is in, and I guarantee you're going to see a lot more investors move back into the Toronto market to start doing these conversions, because we're working with a client right now.
Yeah.
Where we're doing these property tours, and we're going to do a 3 to possibly 4 unit conversion. Right. And those numbers are going to make sense all day long.
One thing I just want to throw out there: when you hit 4 units, things get a little bit more murky. You're getting into a different kind of fire code compliance. You're getting into a slightly different building code compliance. And so just be aware of that when they're working with an architect, like for them to know that they might get into more complicated things and like more rigorous kind of compliance when it comes to 4.
We have Victoria soon on the project.
Oh, she's awesome.
There you go.
Okay, she's awesome.
I only work with the best.
That's it. You're good to go.
Cool.
Awesome.
No, but it's good to know that stuff right now. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's important to ensure that you have the right team with you. Like, just don't go out there and try and figure this stuff on your own. Right. You know, there's this great saying, you know, if you think it's expensive to hire a professional, wait until you hire a non-professional.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because then that professional has to come in and fix all that shit that the non-professional didn't do properly.
You got it.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you do that one.
Yeah.
You now get into a second one?
Yeah, I just refinanced. And because a single family to triplex, it actually brings it into a slightly different asset class. The appraisal process for a triplex is different than for a single family. And so it was, the jump was pretty significant at that time. So we refinanced out, took a bunch of that cash, bought a second one. This was right in the middle of the COVID dip. This is 2020. I bought the second one. This is for $775, again in Toronto, West End.
And these are detached or semis?
Semis.
Okay, semis.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I bought the second one, $775. That one was flat out home run, even bigger house, just perfect. Triplex conversion, flat out. Like that one was shorter amount of time. It was a bit of a more complicated process because there I did a legal duplex and then separated out the third one after. And that, again, that was to maximize the value because of the comps in the area. There were some very, very really high appraised duplexes. So I wanted to slip in under the duplex appraisal and then do the conversion after.
Okay. So let's go back to the first one real quick. What was the cash flow on that?
Oh, when I finished, $2,500.
2,500.
Yeah.
Solid.
Yeah.
Okay. Second one. So now, and what was the conversion on that one cost wise?
Second one was $89,000.
89,000 to legalize it?
It wasn't legal.
No, well,
none
the
of these
two.
are legal.
No, I think you did 2.
2 are legal. Third is not.
Third isn't. Okay,
Yeah.
but 89,000.
Yeah.
And what's the cash flow on that?
2.5.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm coming to Toronto.
Well, this was in 2020, right? So
okay. Well, what do you think it's worth now?
Well, because it all went up and then it all went down, right? So who the hell knows right now? But it doesn't matter what it's worth because I'm not buying and I'm not selling.
Right. You're getting the cash flow.
Yeah.
And this is where it's so important not to speculate and make sure you're buying properties at cash flow.
Yeah.
Right.
Or make them into ones that cash flow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I'm going to go look at some properties in Toronto next week, and we're looking at some that are around, I think it's between 800 to $1 million, and they're semi-detached.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So
if
with the potential, convert to a triplex.
Yeah.
Solid. I think I might need your contractor's number. I'm sure Victoria probably has good contractors.
She has fantastic people. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you do 2.
Yeah.
What's next?
Next, I want to scale. I want to go up. Let's get into residential development. But I don't know the first thing about development. I'm a tech consultant. So I said, all right, well, let's learn this hands-on. So I pick up another house like right in my area, in that same like Eglinton corridor where all the values are going to be going up when the subway comes through. And I said, I'm going to tear this thing down, leave 2 walls, and just build up a big monstrosity. So I go through the entire process, and this was 2021 is when we got that one. And as I picked up that, I started to look around as to what it's going to look like to scale into the residential development side. And then I said, I don't see these numbers working anymore for residential developers. So the costs went up very hard.
Right, because this is when we had the whole supply chain issue with everything getting locked down.
You got it. Yeah. So at that point, the price for lumber, that was a very like high profile one for lumber. It just went through the roof, right? Mm-hmm. And most residential houses are built mostly out of lumber. And so I looked at that and I said, okay, that's not good. And then I started to look at the cost of labor. That's not good. When I started to look at the total cost of actually building one of these houses, it's like, wait, how do I actually make this make sense, especially risk adjusted returns? So it's like, if everything keeps going up the same way that it is right now, like 15% year over year, okay, fine. But is that actually sustainable with all this money printing and all these other things? Like I'm looking at the macro picture. I'm like, this somebody's going to be stuck, holding the bag when the music stops, and taking on residential development with the costs that we have right now. I don't see it working.
So that's interesting that you saw that. You had the understanding, and I guess that was because you're looking at it from a macro level as well too, right? Like this printing of money can't keep going on, and that's going to cause inflation. Right. Yeah, inflation causes higher interest rates, reduces affordability. So if I'm a residential developer, which I was intending to be, I'm intending to go and buy a piece of land and develop, 10 townhouses on it. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So that's going to take, in Toronto, it's going to take 2 years to get permits and then another year and a half to build it. Okay, so if I'm projecting 3.5 years out, can I actually bet right now that the cost of materials are going to stabilize and the affordability, like people actually are going to be able to buy these things? I couldn't make that make sense. I was like, if interest rates are going to double or whatever they're going to go, even over the course of 3 years, nobody can afford these houses anymore. So I can't make the bet to build them. Right.
So then I was like, what do I do now? Where do I go?
Yeah.
And that's when I found industrial.
Now, did you find it yourself? Did you talk to somebody? Did you get a coach?
It wasn't a coach. It was looking around. What are the smart people doing? Where is the smart people or like the smart money going? Where are the smartest investors starting to invest right now, especially the large scale? And that was one piece. And the other piece is just the actual thesis of like, okay, what's going on here? The supply chain is broken. If the supply chain is broken, we need to address it because our entire economy runs on a supply chain of some kind. We have everything that we have on our desk, everything we have in our car, in our house, it comes through somehow from somewhere. And so that supply chain was busted, especially like when we had that really serious move to e-commerce during COVID. Everyone's shopping from home. Mm-hmm. So what are we going to do? We need to build more warehousing. And then when I looked at the industrial asset class, I said, this place is on, this thing's on fire. Like there's just not enough. And the further and further I looked into it, oh wow, the cost to actually build one of these things, to build logistics centers, are like a third or half of what it costs to build residential. And what are the cap rates? Oh wow. And what's the demand? Oh wow. What's the supply? So let's run through the numbers just real quick. Like cap rates, what were they sitting at? At the time, they were sitting at like a 3-ish, 3.5. Okay. And here's the thing. You'd think that those interest rates going up like they have been, that would affect that. Nope. Really? Yeah. And so I didn't know that at the time. All I could see at the time, this is like mid 2021, all I could see at the time was, okay, this makes sense. There's a lot of things about this that make sense. How do I get into this? And that's when I ran into the whole fear thing. Oh, wow. Different asset class. Who knows about this? Industrial. Sounds scary. So I started to talk to some people that develop this stuff, and it's not. Yeah, and let's talk about that, because you talked about that in your talk, which I thought was actually very brilliant. And you really broke it down saying small steps. Talk about that, like the small steps and the importance of doing that. Yeah, actually, I'm gonna rephrase that a little bit. It's not small steps; it's small actions. I don't believe in small steps, because like people are like, oh, I'm gonna kind of incrementally get to here and get to there, and it's like, okay, well, if you're trying to go to the moon, then I suppose jumping off the ground gets you a little closer to the moon, but it doesn't actually get you closer to the moon. So for this, it was like, okay, well, what does it look like to actually develop industrial? Well, you buy land. Okay, cool. And how do you buy land? Well, you have to assess it some way. You have to appraise it. You have to do some studies. What are the studies? So it was literally just working through what is the process of doing it. And as it turns out, it's pretty much the same as residential. In what sense? It's all of the steps are the same. It just, there's some technical differences to each one of them. So yeah, you have to buy a piece of land. You're buying residential land, you're buying industrial land. You got to do some studies. You got to figure out the servicing. You got to figure out the zoning and the official plan and all that kind of stuff. So you go through all of that. Right. You work with a planner or you don't. You talk to the city. That's all the same. And then when you're looking at the actual project, like how do you determine feasibility, cost in, cost out, time, cost of borrowing, like what's your budget? Like all of these steps are the same.
Yeah.
Everything's the same.
Yeah. And it comes down to, it's having the right team around you.
Yeah.
So whether you're in residential, whether you're in industrial, just make sure you have the right team the right players to walk you through each of these actions.
Yeah.
Each of these steps that's going to get you to that finish line. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you get into it. What's the difference now between, say, industrial light or heavy? Is there a difference between the two?
There is, yeah.
Okay.
So I actually don't touch heavy industrial. Heavy industrial is like large manufacturing plants, the ones that have like big chimneys and they make a lot of noise or they make a lot of pollution or that kind of thing.
Like a car.
Like a car plant. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or like steel or things like that. Yeah.
Okay. So you're really just kind of just building, you're more light, just a box for the most part. Is that what it is?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what logistics, trucks pull in, trucks pull out.
Yeah. So let's talk about the zoning for industrial because that's an important piece.
Okay.
So what is industrial zoning? It's actually very flexible. So when you think of industrial, you think of a big box like an Amazon fulfillment center or distribution center.
Yeah. And there's a lot of them getting built right now.
There are. So Amazon itself, it's been on the news of like, Amazon is subleasing a bunch of its new builds. It's canceling some projects. What they're not talking about is all the ones that they are completing. So Amazon, they have to respond to the demand that happened during during COVID. They had to almost double their logistics network over the course of Amazon. So yeah, they had to overshoot. And now they're subleasing some of that space. But Amazon, even though they're the biggest logistics player, they're only like 3% of the market. They're absolutely tiny relative to the actual logistics market. Yeah, they're absolutely tiny. Yeah.
So who's bigger than them?
Prologis.
Okay.
Yeah, but they play in different spaces. Generally, Prologis will actually develop things, and then Amazon will lease from them. So,
Got it.
So they're two different players. But essentially, there's these big boxes, and you'd think that that's the only thing for industrial, but it's actually not. So if you look at your regular paint shop, like your paint shop might actually be like where you buy paint to paint a house. That'll regularly be inside of an industrial space. It's not always retail. And then if you have a manufacturer for paint, they'll generally be in a light industrial building. They don't require like huge amounts of power and all these kinds of things. They just need a space. And so industrial condos are another asset class that people aren't particularly aware of. But you see them all the time as you're like driving around these malls where it's not like only retail, but it's like some bigger office spaces. Some office spaces are even in industrial condos. And so these are generally high. They'll be like 28 clear or 30 foot clear. And they'll be about 3,000 to 5,000 square feet. You can build a mezzanine in there. You'll have a truck that can pull in the back. And so any kind of use that's not very pollutant and not particularly huge, they'll generally fit inside of industrial condos. So that's another use for industrial condos or for industrial zoning. Another one is sports facilities. Often sports facilities are built on industrial zoned land. And then now you'll be hearing a little bit more about these two next asset classes, also completely within the industrial. One is data centers, and then the second one is life sciences. Mm-hmm. So those are two that right now are very, very, very much in demand. There's not enough space out there.
Right. And for data centers, you're saying data centers, right? Yeah. Data centers is huge. I mean, I used to work at TD Bank, and especially now with everything being in the cloud.
Yeah.
The cloud really is essentially these servers.
Yeah.
Right. It's not up in the air.
Yeah.
Like they're actually stored somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And then not only that, then you also need backups of those servers.
You got it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's in high demand right now.
Yeah. And life sciences. So like literally laboratories.
Okay.
Yeah. Laboratories and medical facilities, massive demand right now. And their triple net lease rents are almost 3 times what normal industrial is.
Yeah. I want to talk about the triple lease. We'll get into that in a minute though.
Sure.
So then now let's kind of walk through these steps here. Okay. So now you decide to get into it. Now you're looking for the land.
Yes.
How do you determine the best location, what type of land to be looking at, and what are we, I guess maybe for you specifically, what price range were you looking at?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. At the beginning, I was actually looking a lot at the tertiary markets that were strategically located along major arteries.
Okay.
Like major transportation arteries.
Right. And give me an example of some tertiary markets.
So the one that I ended up buying in is Fort Erie.
Okay, so that's tertiary when you're talking industrial.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Residential, not so much.
Right.
Okay, but industrial, yes.
Yeah. So that's a tertiary, secondary, because Niagara could be considered a secondary kind of, and so yeah. So Fort Erie, tertiary market, but it's right along the QEW.
Okay.
And so there it was. The reason I picked that particular piece of land is it was already zoned prestige industrial, which has a wide variety of uses that are automatically permitted. One of them is self-storage. That was originally the purpose of that particular development. Self-storage also, by the way, falls under industrial in most municipalities. And so it was originally going to be that, but then we actually pivoted to doing a warehouse there. And so that's what that project ended up being, is an industrial warehouse.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why the pivot?
Better market, just generally better clientele for that kind of thing. Self-storage does well in recessions, but it doesn't do as well as industrial warehousing. It's also the highest and best use for that land due to its proximity to the border. We're about 8 minutes from the border with that land.
Right.
So any kind of company that does a lot of import-export or any kind of shipping, that's a very advantageous location for them. And self-storage doesn't really maximize on that proximity to the border.
Right. And I'm assuming now as well, too, that the warehouses started to go up in demand because of the supply chain issue.
That's
number
right.
one. Number two, to get out of just in time to just in case.
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's why now all these companies are now like, hey, look, we need to have this stuff here and store it here.
Yeah, that's right. There's more of that. Yeah. So during COVID, what we saw was the effect of having these long, complex supply chains that are highly interdependent with all these other countries, and they're very long supply chains. Like they really require so many different handoff points. And as soon as you have a failure somewhere, like remember when that ship got stuck in the canal?
Yeah, or Panama Canal.
Yeah.
And I bet a lot of people were like, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, that's your TV.
Yeah.
that's your iPhone. Car. That's your yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And
because and you probably know more about the Panama Canal than I do, just because of the industry that you're in now.
Yeah.
But that's like a major, what is that again now? That's a major artery or a major flowway between what regions is that now?
Well, it's actually all regions, because if something has a cross from the east to the west side of the North American continent, they have to come through that.
That's the only way through.
Otherwise, you're going around.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's it's crucial.
Is there any other place in the world similar to the Panama Canal?
Suez.
And the Suez. Okay.
Yeah.
So how many of them do we have?
Those are the two major ones. Yeah. Yeah. You get something stuck in there, things get very, very bad, very, very quick.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was when something like that happened, or during COVID, the port of Los Angeles just completely got swamped.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah. So that was actually the one that hit us the hardest. The Panama Canal one, that didn't hit us as hard. The LA port, because the LA port is the main port from China.
Okay.
So even products in Canada, most of them get shipped through LA. So when that got backlogged, then everything started to fall apart. And really, when I say that, I mean inflation started to hit. That's it's almost 1-to-1 what happened there to inflation, because before that, you just had enough product, just enough, and you had just few enough people shopping. And inflation really only starts to happen when there's too much money chasing not enough product. And so you cut off the supply of product, and bam, all of a sudden you have people that have money, and there's just not enough product to buy.
So then that was a combination of two things. So printing of the money and the global chain supply breakdown. Yeah. So the printing of the money was almost like, it's like the fuel, and then the supply chain breakdown was the spark. Or the dry wood.
Yeah, sure. Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So kind of getting back into that now. So then you decide to go to the warehouse route.
That's right.
Now you also touched on that there's different zones within industrial. I don't know if we completed that.
Yeah. So there's different uses within industrial zoning. And so if you get land that is zoned that, or you're rezoning to industrial land, you have a lot of flexibility. And that's also another reason why I love industrial, because it's not like residential where you just say, I'm getting zoned for residential. That means now I can build residential. Whereas with industrial, if you come in and you're like, I'm going to build industrial warehousing, but all of a sudden the market shifts, you have the ability to have those multiple uses.
Okay. Now, are you doing so you don't really have to go through any type of variance, or are there variances that you sometimes go through in industrial?
There will be variances, yes.
Okay.
So the variances will be more around like lot site coverage, things like that. There's going to be some setback variances you might do, but honestly, at this point, I'm doing big enough projects that setbacks aren't really a thing anymore. If I was doing smaller projects, they would be more of a thing. So at this point, the variances that I'd be looking for would be things like parking, like the ratio of parking that we have on site,
Okay.
Or like landscaping variances.
So these are minor variances for the most part, or you consider major?
So it's like this. They're minor in that we're looking for maybe a 1% reduction in parking requirement. We're looking at a 50-acre site. That's a pretty significant piece. So depending on who's looking at it, that might be minor or major.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So then I don't think we've fully talked on the numbers here. So let's talk about one project. So you change it to warehouse. What was the price of this particular lot?
Oh, the lot itself, it was around 1.8 million.
Okay. So 1.8.
Yeah.
Now, how are you raising that, or are you doing that on your own?
So I did a combination of a few things. It was a bunch myself, and it was some partners that came in, and we JV'd together, and we closed on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now you've closed on it. Now, are you building it, or are you bringing somebody else, or are you going to sell it to somebody else?
So this one specifically, what we're doing is we're bringing in, the zoning is already there, and we have a site plan that's prepared. And so now we're bringing in clients who are going to be leasing from us. And so this site plan has 70,000 square feet available. And so clients will come in, they'll say, we want 40,000 square feet. And we like this location and so on and so forth. Then we negotiate a triple net lease with them, and we build to suit. We build it to suit them. And their lease rate will be determined by how they want us to finish it for them. When we bring a client like that in, then we actually start the build.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's talk about the triple
net lease.
Yeah, triple net lease.
Yeah.
Okay, how does that work? Because that sounds intriguing.
It is the best.
Is it? Okay, let's talk about that.
I love triple net leases because I came from residential. I came from leasing to people, and so when you're a residential landlord, you pay for utilities, you pay for insurance, you pay for maintenance, you pay for all kinds of stuff. Not so in triple net leases. Triple net leases are the standard, or more or less at this point, the standard commercial lease, and especially in industrial, they're pretty much the thing to do. And so in a triple net lease, the actual leaser, they pay for everything other than the mortgage.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you're talking, they're paying for maintenance.
Yep.
So things break down, you don't have to worry about it.
Yep.
I'm loving this already.
Yep.
So then they're paying for what? The taxes.
Yep.
They're paying for utilities.
Yep.
And they're paying for insurance.
Yep.
They pay for insurance too.
Yep.
That's wild.
Yep.
And what else is there? That's it.
That's it.
Yeah. You have to, so there's no property management.
Oh yeah. They pay their lease as well.
Oh yeah. Shit. So they're leasing from you too. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I think I might get into this shit.
All right, let's do this.
Okay, so you do that. Okay, so now have you found anybody for this particular warehouse?
No.
Okay, so now that's the next thing.
That's the next thing, yeah.
How do you do that? How do you find a client now for this particular location?
We work with brokers. We work with agents. We work with like the big brokerages, and they bring in clients. And there's some personal contacts that I work with as well. But this is, these are long-term projects. So to find the right fit for the right place, like the right location, and then also the right timing, that's a little tricky. So that's the process. And once you find someone, then it's just as hard for them to find a place that works for them as it is for us to find a person that works for us. So once we find that fit, then off we go.
So then, was this on MLS?
This one was not. No, this one off market.
So do a lot of these transactions take place off market?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now you're playing with the big boys.
Yeah. So let me speak a little bit about that, because it's kind of funny. Like with industrial, it's like if something hits MLS, like land that might be appropriate for industrial, if it hits MLS, that means that all the big players, all the smart money is already passed on it. Yeah. And there are a few like very, very big players in this arena, and they're very well connected. They're very well known. People know that if they want to sell land that might be industrial, they go to them. And
right.
So, but the only drawback for those guys is that they're not quite as agile. So somebody who's smaller might be able to make a move and be opportunistic, or some things might be just a little too small for them, but they're too big for like regular players.
Right, because these big players, they have a budget for the year. They've already kind of set things out and have an idea where they, and I guess also too, it's like playing chess, right? So they're strategically buying, putting their warehouses or whatever business that they're in logistically throughout the region or the country.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm starting to get this thing.
Yeah. So essentially all I had to do at the beginning was network with anybody who could possibly have any contact with industrial or raw land. So it was just tons and tons of networking. So I built a nice network of people that send me stuff. So some people were residential developers, and they're, if there's land that they don't want, then they'll let me know. Or there'll be people that are, industrial condo brokers. And so if they're aware of a development over here, then I might look around, because industrial likes to be around other industrial. It helps get it passed.
So there's obviously something that intrigued you about this particular lot. I know that you said it was in a tertiary market.
Yeah.
I guess number two, that it made it a little bit more affordable on the purchase side of things. But so somebody presented this, and why did they present this to you, and why did that other person get out of it? Like, can we touch on that?
They were 92.
Okay, fair enough.
They just wanted to retire into the sunset.
Right.
And I was there at the right time, at the right place. And I talked to the right guy, and he said, hey, I might know someone who's looking for an industrial piece of land. And it just worked. And it was already zoned, which was another piece that really worked for me. I didn't want to go through the complications of zoning for my first one. And so it really worked.
So how long was he sitting on that land?
Oh, probably like 40 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is like no short-term play. These are long-term plays.
I think he may have owned it from his grandfather, who settled there from, who the hell knows when.
Okay. But I mean, okay, so now you pick it up, and there's got to be something that you're looking at to saying this makes sense within the next 5 years, 10 years. Like, how far out are you looking?
There I was looking 1 year, because highest and best use at that time to pick it up was for self-storage. And so that self-storage was almost automatically approved, because it was already within the permitted uses. So all I had to do was go through and get the permitting and then sell it off. That was my plan, to just sell it off to another self-storage developer.
Okay. That was for your first one.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And now you said you have 3 that you're currently working on.
Yeah, there's actually more, but the 3 major ones that I'm working on at the moment, they're all significantly larger. So I'm working on, one is 50 acres, one is about 65, and one is 100 acres.
And where are these?
These are all in Caledon, Brampton kind of area.
Okay. And then for those ones, they're a year or 2 years out as well too?
No, those ones are much, much longer. Yeah.
Okay. So now we're 10 years?
I'd say the 2 of them are about 5 years out, and the third one is about 7 to 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you think they'll be for? What's your well, I guess in today's market, what's your game plan?
Yeah.
Because 5 years or 4 years from now, it could probably maybe even switch, right?
It could.
Because right now, I would assume then that's on the official plan, that this is what it's zoned for.
Yeah.
Right? Industrial.
So that's actually an important piece with these, especially with 2 of these. 2 of these are designated as employment lands, but they are not yet industrial zoning.
What do you mean employment land?
So inside the official plan, there's areas that the city will say, we want more business over here. We want to grow in
commercial.
this direction. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And so industrial is one of the designations under the employment land designation. So the city will say they'll release a map that says, these are the areas that we would like business to grow in the direction of. And they would designate that as employment land. Mm-hmm. And then if you buy land before it's designated, it's like, I don't know, $200,000 an acre. If you buy land once it's designated, it's like $1.5 million an acre. If you buy land that's already zoned, especially in industrial, it's like $2.5 an acre.
Is that when it then goes into the official plan?
That's the last one. That's the last one. Yeah.
When it's now zoned.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's 3 phases?
Yeah, there could even be more in the middle. But yeah, more or less, those are the major ones. It'll be like raw, it's like agricultural, just sitting there as farmland. Yeah. Then it'll get designated. Then it'll get actually put into the official plan. Then it'll get zoned.
How does the financing work on this stuff?
Well, it depends on what you're doing, because raw land financing is generally going to be topping out at about 50-60%. If you have a very high profile or or close to development piece of land, you might be able to get some A lenders to go for it. Otherwise, you may want to be closing it private and then refinancing later at a more approved stage. You might just go private all the way through and have interest only. You could be doing like GPLP structures where you actually have the lender as part of the GP, in which case they're bringing in their own financing, things like that. So it's the other cool thing about industrial that I like way more than residential, at least at this point, is the creativity. There's so much leeway for creating deals. It's like, who was it that said the best deals, they're not found, they're made. And so right. in industrial, there's this opportunity to really create deals that really work for a lot of people.
Yeah, you know what? I like that saying. Yeah.
It was Arnio. I think it was Stefan Arnio.
Yeah, probably. He said a lot of interesting and fascinating and very intelligent things.
Yeah.
You know, he was taken away too early.
Yeah.
You know, he was controversial too.
Yeah.
But you know what? He had a lot of tension on him.
Yeah.
And you know, he was a smart guy.
It was. Yeah.
Anything else we didn't this is what I want to touch on as well too. CN Rail.
Oh yeah.
And also Kansas Southern.
Kansas Southern, yeah.
Let's talk about that guy. I think that's intriguing.
Right. So we talked about how like logistics is very interdependent, and when LA got backlogged, then all of a sudden everything's getting hit. Panama that got stuck, then all of a sudden everything else is getting hit. So one of the things that we're not talking about is how does product actually move across the country? So generally we have east-west transport. Especially in Canada, we have CN and CP, they do east-west transport. And for a while, that was okay for us. That was okay. And then when all of this stuff started to happen with China, where the tension with China, that's been building for like 15 years, but it really started to get ratcheted up with Trump. He really started to lay down the hammer on China. And so you can say that he started more or less a trade war. It's not an official trade war, but the sanctions and the kind of posturing towards China started to indicate to a lot of the smart money that we are looking at a decoupling from China. Now, what does decoupling mean? It's not like a single event. It really means that we're going to stop depending on them as much. And so what do we depend on them for? Well, they're the world's factory. They have the cheapest labor force. They have the cheapest materials. And so we can no longer depend on them. And so this trend of what's called nearshoring or onshoring, which is bringing manufacturing over from China into somewhere close to us, started to make a lot more sense for a lot of people. For a while, it didn't make sense. Economically, it still made sense to do things over there. But now it's starting to make more and more sense to do things here for a few reasons. Shipping costs are higher due to cost of fuel. Sure, that's there. But it's really the reliability. Like you can't depend on your supply chain. You can't depend on your business if the place that's actually manufacturing what you're making might decide to just stop sending stuff.
Right.
And so companies have at one point they started to work on onshoring and nearshoring, and then it started to accelerate hard because of the increasing tensions. And so where can we manufacture? Well, Mexico is the best alternative for the Americas. And so this move,
because it's just too expensive to do it here in Canada.
Exactly. Our labor force
and the US.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So
well, I mean,
for now,
it's become too expensive because we're so used to it being so much more cheaper.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. So Mexico is becoming this new manufacturing hub for us. So that's cool. Great. No problem. But how do we get that product here? How do we get it up the East Coast? And so this is where this partnership between CN and Kansas Southern, that really started to make a really big difference. So they're merging. Mm-hmm. And when they're merging, they create a continuous single supplier, like a single transporter from Mexico, because Kansas Southern goes all the way down into Mexico. Their lines run into Mexico, all the way up into Canada, all the way across the East Coast.
So now we can start producing, because we're not doing a lot. Are we doing a lot down there or no?
So we are not because of this.
But we're going to now.
Exactly. We're going to start buying more from there. And so it's not just like we're going to make something in Mexico and then ship it up to Canada. It's not so much that. It's that when you have like a phone or something, there's like 50,000 pieces that go into it. And there's these intermediary pieces that need to get manufactured somewhere. And so for US manufacturing, you might have the final assembly in the US, but it's actually the intermediary pieces that have to get built somewhere. And so the fact that we're going to have this very efficient chain of manufacturing where we can have the initial products shipped into Mexico, intermediary built over there, and then shipped up into the US, finished there, that becomes a huge, huge player for us. And same with Canada. Now Canada has access to cheaper manufacturing of intermediary pieces. So we can start being the final value add of the chain without having to ship to China and back.
Will this be cheaper?
Yeah.
How many
It won't be cheaper than China, but it'll definitely be cheaper than doing it here or in the US.
How many warehouses does a product go through before it gets into a consumer's hands? Do you know?
Average of 14.
Like, okay, it's like a phone. So you're saying like my iPhone is going to run through 14 different warehouses before it gets into my hand?
That's average. Yeah.
Okay, but something like, say, like, I don't know, like a tablecloth is not going through that many. No. It is?
It might, because think about it like this. Where does something get manufactured in China? It might get manufactured somewhere along the coast, but if we see anything about the economics of coastal cities, they're expensive. So you're probably going to have manufacturing happening somewhere inland or further inland. Mm-hmm. So it's got to go through a few logistics hubs, even just to get on the ship. Then it gets off the ship. Then it has to come to our port. And then from there, it needs to go through a distribution center and maybe another distribution center because, these distribution centers, they have to be regional. And then it'll go to whatever retailer that you're at.
Right. So some are getting assembled along the way.
Yeah.
And some are just passing through hands.
That's right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's an interesting.
Yeah. And in North America, we're 1.2 billion square feet behind in terms of logistics space.
Compared to where? China?
Compared to what we need in order to actually fulfill our supply chain as demanded right now.
Yeah, this is interesting because see, the way it felt like the world was moving is that we were moving to what's the right word? Globalization.
Yep.
That's what I'm looking for. But now it seems like there's like this decoupling.
Deglobalization. That's exactly where we're at. Yeah.
Have you heard of this? This is something I heard back in like 2014, 15 when I kind of started going down some interesting rabbit holes of, this trade wars. And, you touched on this, and there's currency wars, which we're definitely in.
Yep.
And then we get into world wars where now it starts to become
technology
kinetic.
War.
And there's a technology war in there as well. To the technology wars before kinetic war.
Yeah. Yeah. And one in the middle there is the currency war. Cultural wars.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the cultural war we're in right now too. That's right. A heavy one.
Yeah. So we're more or less at this point with Russia, we're at 5 of them. And with China, we're at 4 of them.
Well, now you got Taiwan as well too.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So it's not that we're directly with China. It's just that Taiwan it's looking more and more likely like that's going to be an issue. Okay.
So you've paid attention to this stuff.
Yeah.
Let's kind of dive into it. What are your thoughts on it? Give us because you're obviously doing things because you see things happening.
Yeah.
And this is why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So on the China or just the East, that's the biggest worry for me and probably a lot of people. And I don't come up with this stuff. I just sort of assemble way smarter people than I into some sort of narrative that I can understand. Ray Dalio is a huge influence for me, and
I love his stuff. Yeah, his stuff is really, really good. There's a great little documentary out there. It's about 40 or 50 minutes.
Yeah, how the economy works. Yeah,
that, and then there's also I think the Change in World Order.
Change in World Order.
Change in World Order. Really, really good. If you guys are listening, go and listen to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's got 2 books, and he does this great format in these books where he'll put a bold piece inside of every chapter, and he's like, if you just want to read one thing, read this bold piece, and if you want to get into the details and be a nerd, you can read the rest of these.
Okay.
And so he has these two books. One of them is called Navigating the Changing World Order, and the other one is called Navigating Big Debt Principles or the Big Debt Cycles. And so that's another piece at play here too. But just on the macro piece with the East, it looks like somewhere between 2 and 7 years out, we're going to have some sort of major conflict over there. Again, my crystal ball is as murky as everybody else's, but that seems to be where economics, cultural, and military experts from a broad range of fields are pretty much saying that's where we're going. And Taiwan is so crucial to the world because they are by far the most major manufacturer of advanced chips.
I heard they're like 90%.
They're just under 90. They're at about 85. Yeah.
Close enough.
Yeah. So
that's a lot.
It's a big deal. And the reason it's a big deal is it's really hard to convey to what degree the world depends on Taiwan. But really, like the kind of microchips that we have in our washing machine, those things are like, they're manufactured all over the place. China is actually the biggest manufacturer for those kinds of things. But those aren't the kind of chips that actually change the world. The kind of chips that are manufactured that are in your computer or that are in your phone, those are another level. They're a little bit better. And slowly China is going to get into that level. It's actually the next level up. The ones that are in the military, the ones that are in satellites, and the ones that are in artificial intelligence, those kinds of microchips, they only get manufactured at the most advanced facilities. And those facilities are all in Taiwan, other than a few that are right now getting built in the US.
And that explains why you can see the tension between China and the US, because China's got their naval ships there now. And I think the US has shipped 200 men and over there, right? So this is a legit threat to the world. Yeah, and there's two elements of why Taiwan is so important. The first one is the microchips. So whoever is in control of those microchips can have the ability to just throttle the rest of the world from access to those chips. And so that's its own kind of thing. The second is that the US generally has a containment policy for China. And so the containment policy essentially says we would like to limit their sphere of influence. And there's a island chain, it's called the First Island Chain. And that island chain includes Japan, it includes it includes Taiwan, it includes the Philippines. And so there's this chain of islands that runs through the East China Sea and the South China Sea. And that's the limit of the sphere of influence. Taiwan is dead center on that. And so if China controls Taiwan, they can release all of their ships out into the Pacific. And so that's another reason why Taiwan is so crucial, both from of course, a technology standpoint, but also from a literally geographical military standpoint. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So then based on all of that, this is part of the reasons why you've moved into the industrial space, because you understand the importance of, not just in time, but just in case. Just in case. Yeah, just in case. That's part of it. Well, the other piece really is, in a war, we have a bigger reliance on consumer staples. Those consumer staples, they need more security as to where they come from. And so, yes, we need to have more things that we can store, but also we need to be able to manufacture more things here. And what are the consumer staples you're talking about? You're obviously talking about food. Yeah. And what else? Is there anything else? Energy? Yeah, food, energy, like basic household goods that you need, like car parts and things like that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, like all the consumer staples, they need to have more security for us as consumers as to where they're going to come from during a time of conflict. Yeah. There's another thing that's happening right now in the world as well too. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have you here and I like your particular strategy is BRICS. Yeah. Can you touch on that and what that means? Because I think there's a lot of people who just don't even understand that acronym. I think maybe now, because I'm starting to see it now on the news more, but I mean, I've known about the BRICS for a couple of years, more than that. Right. It's important. Yeah, absolutely. And my research into BRICS has not been as deep as I'd like it to be. But high level, why it affects us is because if the international supply chain is becoming deglobalized, we're going to have a bigger and bigger reliance on a closer allies, on the ones that are geographically more located closest to us, because then supply chains are safer that way. And so all of that really does for me is when I look at the US dollar losing international power, then it's going to increase its reliance on the people that stick with the US, on the countries that stick with the US. And the U.S. is by far Mexico's biggest trading partner. And so I just see more and more reliance on Mexico to supply more and more manufacturing. Right. And when we're talking about the BRICS as well, too, we're talking about Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Yeah. But here's an interesting piece. And look, I'm not an expert at this myself either. Yeah. But I think Mexico just applied to be part of the BRICS nation. They did, yeah. And this is also at a high level. These countries are coming together to come up with their own currency to not use the US dollar as a reserve currency, because the way that it's been for many years is to trade oil, these countries have to have US dollars. They no longer, I think China now, and is it Sudan, has said that, hey, you can actually trade in the yuan. Right. I think they also said that for Brazil as well, too. So these things are moving fast.
Right.
And the concern that I see would be that now if these countries don't have to hold US dollars, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you would potentially get even more inflation. Right. Because now you get more US dollars coming home to roost. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Very interesting times.
It is. And one thing that honestly I struggle with is to actually keep up with where things are shifting, because one move like that, like Saudi Arabia, it looks like it's starting to make some really serious moves away from being America's biggest partner in the Middle East.
Right.
That's huge. That is absolutely massive. Like, we can't overstate how important that is.
Did I say Sudan? I think I said Sudan.
You did say Sudan.
I meant to say Saudi Arabia.
So they're moving away from being America's biggest ally. That's a military piece. That's a geographic piece. That's an economic piece. Like, it's massive.
Well, that's a petrodollar.
Yeah, exactly. And same with Turkey, by the way. So Turkey is part of NATO, but Turkey is not playing ball with NATO. And there's some that are saying that Turkey may start looking at, some kind of moves away from moving in step with NATO.
Right.
And they're an important negotiator for everyone. And like, there's so much interdependence of all these countries that are shifting alliances all over the place right now.
Okay, so let's shift it back then, because we're getting close to the end here, in regards to the regular investor, and they're hearing all of this high level macro stuff that we just kind of went through. You've shifted into the industrial space. What are your thoughts on the residential space as well, too? Because you obviously have some residential. Where would you buy, and would you stick in the residential space? Because there's a lot of immigration coming here as well. There
is. So I'm probably the worst guy to ask that question to.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. Because I'm incredibly bearish about residential.
Okay.
I don't want to build residential because, on one hand, yes, we have an enormous amount of demand. It's no secret. Like, we had 1 million immigrants, or whatever was the real number. By the way, those immigration numbers they're not misleading. It's just that they're not qualified correctly.
Yeah, what are the real numbers? 'Cause I've heard 1 million, I've heard 500,000, I've heard, and when I say those numbers, I mean coming to Canada.
Yeah.
To me, it sounds like there's 500,000 coming to Canada, and then 250 kind of land in the GTA. What are your thoughts on that?
So something like that. I don't know the exact ratios, but the important thing to know is that when somebody says 500,000 or whatever it is, that's not 500 people that were in another country and then they are now in this country this year. That includes things like if somebody was here on a student visa and then they applied for a PR.
Right.
Or somebody.
So they may have been here a couple years, and now all of a sudden
or 10.
They've now gotten there. Right.
Yeah. So anything like that, any new person that is a permanent resident or an applicant to that's included in that number. So, but regardless of what the real number is, at the end of the day, we have a lot of people coming in, and so on the high level, it seems to make sense. Go build residential. We don't have enough residential, all that kind of stuff. So on one hand, sure, that makes sense. But when I look at the actual economics of developing residential, how does that look? So first you need the land. Land is expensive, but that can be mitigated. Okay, fine. And then you need materials. So we know materials are up, and inflation continues to bring materials up. They're not growing the same way, but we can safely assume about a 5%. That's what cost estimators use right now. 5% inflation on materials every year. Okay, fine, cool. Then we have labor. Labor is a massive problem, and it's becoming a bigger and bigger part of the cost of developing residential. We don't have enough labor.
We don't have enough labor, right?
And we're going to have over 50,000 laborers retiring in the next 5 years, and we don't have nearly enough even right now.
Right. So you can get rid of all the red tape you want.
Yeah.
And you still won't be able to build all the houses that we need.
That's right.
Right. Because we need 1.4, I think it is, million homes today at 4 p.m.
Yeah. Yeah. And it gets worse. So this is why I said I'm the worst guy to ask about this. But then, okay, fine. We built the thing. Fine. We built it. Now someone's got to buy it. And wages aren't even coming close to keeping up with inflation. And with your interest rates being where they are now, the affordability for these units, as in like what you can buy with the same salary, is way lower than it was 2 years ago. You can't qualify for the same mortgage anymore. And our rules for qualifying for mortgages are about to get stricter. That's what I'm hearing. Like the, what's it called? The stress test. The stress test isn't going away, and it might be getting bigger. And so when I look at that, I say, okay, it's probably going to cost more and more to build these things, and people will be able to afford less and less. I don't care what the demand is. If somebody can't afford it, they can't afford it. And so it's got to make sense for the developer to build the thing, or they're just not going to build it. And it doesn't matter how much we are behind. It won't matter. They were not going to build it. And ultimately, what we don't have here in Canada, we don't have a bunch of people living on the streets because there aren't enough houses. That's not a thing. What we have is that there aren't enough houses for people to own. And that's the piece that's not really being talked about as much. It's that we don't have a physical number of houses problem. We have a culture problem. In Europe, it's completely normal to spend your entire life renting because there's just not enough space there to build more stuff. And it's fine. People are totally fine with that. It just in North America, especially in Canada, we have this perception that we are entitled to owning property. And if there isn't enough property to own, then we're in a crisis. And I disagree with that. And I think we're going to be seeing that shift in culture from owning to renting sometime. It's probably already happening, but it's going to be happening more and more.
Yeah, you know what? That's actually a really good point. I never thought about it that way. I mean, I know now that you've said it, it makes sense to me. Yeah. That, when you look in European countries, many of them rent their whole entire lives, right? Yeah. And it's a fairly normal thing. Culturally over here, I mean, I just had a talk with somebody today or this morning, and I was like, these kids will never be able to own.
Yeah.
You know, when I bought, it was like 2 to 3 times my income.
Yeah.
It's now anywhere from 8 to like 15 times, your income, depending on where you are in the city.
Yeah.
You can't get in there, and unless you're getting gifted the funds for the down payment. Like I'm looking at my kids, and the only way is we have to help them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or they have to save their down payment for the next 20 something years.
Oh yeah, but then that doesn't work either because the price of housing is going to continue to increase faster than they can save.
Right. Yeah. So, you know what? You're right. It's just going to have to be a cultural shift.
Yeah.
That people are just going to have to get used to renting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm like, why would I be building houses right now? Maybe it'll make sense. I don't know. Maybe someone can make it make sense, but I can't make it make sense on a risk-adjusted returns basis.
Right. Interesting. Listen, this was a very interesting conversation. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much for coming in.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would like to add, just like a mindset, good piece of advice, if somebody's thinking about getting into the investing strategy that you are now in? If they've sat down and like, man, I really enjoyed this conversation. I want to do what he's doing.
You want me to breed my competition?
I want you to breed your competition. Look, we understand the 80-20 rule anyways.
Yeah.
Only 20% of the people are going to take the action anyways.
Yeah. So here's what I'll say. This is not hard. As in, it's not complicated, this stuff. It's simple, but it's not easy. Sorry, it's simple, but it's not easy. Like, it's simple to do this stuff. You just get a list of what needs to get done, and then you go do it. It's just, everything is not going to be straightforward. It's going to be bigger. People are going to be more scared to talk to you because of the word industrial. We're talking development. So development is longer term. So if you're looking for investors as somebody who wants to actually develop, you're going to limit the number of people you can talk to. When you get into the level of deals that I'm doing now, you're going to be talking almost exclusively to institutional investors. So I'm talking mostly at this point to family offices, life cos, so like insurance companies, mutual funds, and small banks. Those are the kind of investors that I bring in. I don't generally work with smaller investors for these bigger projects. I do work with them on my ownership stake for these projects, but for like the majority of these, like these are $50 to $100 million projects. There's no single investors that can handle that kind of thing. So generally, I'll work with a mix of small investors on our general partnership stake, and then I'll work with large investors and I bring them in on that side. So if somebody's doing or looking to do something like this, start networking into the big institutional investors. You'll need them. You'll need them sooner than later.
And how do they do that, or where do they go?
Anywhere that they can.
So they have events that are happening talking about this stuff.
There's
podcasts.
There's podcasts. There's events. There's talk to your brokerage. Like any brokerage, they'll have an industrial wing, and they may have investors that invest in industrial over there. So you may want to chat with them. Mm-hmm. Talk to even like your regular realtors, because they may know someone who works in industrial, and so on and so forth. So it's just network, and just open your mouth. Just say the thing, because people, like, they don't know what you're thinking, and people are generally somewhat shy to say, this is what I do.
Right.
And so just say what you're doing, and you'll be surprised what comes up.
It's the same damn thing as residential. That's what I think I'm going to title it that. It's the same damn thing as residential.
Yeah. Yeah. Just often it's bigger.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's obviously different moving pieces, but I think at the end of the day, it's just taking action and going out there and networking and learning. Yeah. Taking this information in.
Yeah. Well, speaking of opening your mouth and saying the thing, like, I'm always looking for land. That's the thing for me. I'm looking for land that's strategically located, that's not strategically located. Let me know about land. Because at the end of the day, the biggest problem, you'll always have one of three problems, like money, people, or deal. Mm-hmm. So money, not a particularly big problem for me. People, not a particularly big problem for me. It's deal flow.
Yeah. And that's usually the same even in residential.
Yep.
Right. So, if you can control two, usually you can get the other one.
Yeah, exactly.
Easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I said, I've enjoyed this conversation. If people want to learn more about you or get in contact with you, how can they do that?
Either YVL Properties Instagram, so Y like Yankee Victor Larry Properties, or just email me, yvlproperties@gmail.com.
All right.
They both work. I have a website as well. You can see some of the other projects that I'm up to right now. So there's a few more as well, but those are the ones that have really made the difference. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And we'll do this again. We'll do a follow-up to see where you are maybe a year or so from now.
Well, next time we got to talk about AI.
You know what? I just did a podcast on that too. It's just crazy. I know. We'll talk about it right now.
Okay.
All right. But not on this podcast. We're going to talk about it afterwards.
Fair enough.
All right, bud. All right. Take it easy, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to today's show with Gary Hibbert. Please don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and connect with your host on Instagram @Gary Hibbert. Until next time, stay mindful and remember, you don't have to be great to start. Just start, and you'll be on the path to being great.